Okay, well, so let's continue with the following variation. C3 in the Smith-Morra and knight f6. So another anti-variation which doesn't capture the pawn. This is actually transposing to kind of Alapin variation. The Alapin move order is e4, c5, c3, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4. And if he plays c takes d4, so it is transposing to this variation. Okay, and here we will also see a sharper variation, bishop c4, queen c7. Very smart continuation, because yeah, the point is that if bishop takes d5, then queen takes e5, and he wins a pawn even, and then take the bishop. So it's a really tricky one. Okay, however, if the knight leaves somewhere, we can just, for example here, we can also continue with bishop b3, and we have kind of compensation here. It's also true for example, e6, but yeah, c takes d4, bishop takes d5, with all black has to calculate. So queen c7 and queen e2. So of course I don't take on d5, just protect the bishop, and knight b6. If instead of knight b6, let's see how about if the opponent is playing e6. Just a normal continuation. Bishop takes d5, e takes d5. This is always a critical thing, because okay, black's pawn structure will be bad, yes, after this. However, with d6 later, he can exchange and he won't have a double pawn at all. But the question is that how is the way for that? How long can he reach that? Knight f3. Of course we can't take on d4 because queen takes c1. So this bishop is unprotected here. So knight f3 is normal. And b6. Yeah, it's actually very funny. Both sides are ask the opponent, please take the pawn. Because for example, d takes c3. Okay, knight takes c3. Black has a pawn up. But white is extremely active. So always there are some pressure for the material. Bishop b4, castle. Actually this was a game, so castle is already an improvement here, and we even give up one more. Queen c4 is the main, because after castle we are threatening with knight takes d5, so black can't continue the development to ignore these things, because castle knight takes d5 and he's in a big trouble suddenly. How about if bishop c3, b takes and queen takes? Somehow we can feel that if he grabs one more pawn, that should be too much. So it's too greedy. Bishop d2, queen a3. Look this position. The queen is running, the black queen is running, but his all pieces are on the back rank. Not a principled play. But of course, it's requiring a very accurate play with white. Knight d4. Castle. Knight b5. So this was his general idea with the knight d4. So to just go forward and it's this knight b5 tempo, and white would like to go on the dark square c7, d6 and create several threats there. Queen a6 only move to pin the knight. Otherwise, for example, Yeah, otherwise how can he avoid the knight c7? No other way, because queen c5, rook a c1. Tempo, queen has to leave and then knight is jumping to c7 and he is very good. So queen a6. Okay, a4. Knight c6. And queen h5. Also just go forward here. Queen b6. And now white has a very I don't say completely original, it's a very creative plan, creative strategy and maneuver. Rook a3. Yes, rook a3 exclamation mark, and we come on the third rank. Yes, we activate here. Or h3. So the third rank, this is just come, and yeah, it's and which is the most wondering here is that white is already objectively winning. But if we somehow think about the principles, we can feel that okay, rook on a8 completely stuck, bishop also didn't develop, can't push the pawn because I take it, queen is also not an active, knight is also just come here, okay, he castled but his king is pretty alone. If h6 then bishop takes h6 anytime, if g6 then he weakened the dark squares. Yeah, so we can imagine he's actually in some trouble. Okay, so this was the bishop takes c3. Let's see how about queen c4 instead. Queen takes c4, d takes c4, and knight b5. Yeah, it's also just go forward. And knight a6. How else could he protect the c7? No other way. King d8 seems to be very bad. Bishop a5, knight d6 check also doesn't help. So something more active way he need for that. So knight a6, a3. Chase away the bishop a bit. Okay, black has bishop pair, but the position is, I don't say it's completely closed, but the knight has good squares, for example d6, and he can't really activate his bishops. Bishop c5 is the main. Let's see how about bishop e7 instead. And now also great move coming, knight d2 exclamation mark. Going for the c4 pawn, just capture that. Castle or b6, yeah, b6, knight takes d4 and then castle. Yeah, it would be just same with different move order. And rook d1. Knight c5, yeah, because bishop b7 could have been met by rook takes d7, so it was not working at all. So knight c5 he should play. And of course now I already try some activity with the knights. Knight c7, rook b8, and knight d5. Yeah, we just transfer to d5 the knight, from where it's of course much more powerful attacking the bishop, and there are many other things also here. Bishop d8. Yeah, he has to go back. Okay, I can't say that this is so passive because the bishops from the back rank are also not bad at all. Just some activity has with white, and black's problem is that he can't activate his rooks from those bishops. And also I just go forward b4, and objectively white is better already here, because very hard to find any special thing with black. For example, if the knight jumps to b3, we can play rook b1, knight takes c1, and just take it back, rook b c1. My knights are really good, even I will jump to d6. I can't say that the bishop pair is a big problem for white, and it's support for black in anything. It's not. Bishop b7, I will jump to knight d6, maybe bishop c6 and then b5. Just very active play. And white is good. Okay, so this was the bishop e7. Let's see the bishop c5. And always think about the different. Bishop e3 now. Yes, if I would do the same strategy with knight d2, maybe this is a little bit else, because he can play d5, and if e takes d6, I take it en passant. The bishop is not on e7 from where it would be hanging, and he can come with bishop e6, protected the c4, prepare for something rook d8 and take back this pawn. And which is the most important? Black bishops are active. It came out and get some activity. So compared to the previous position, this is a very important factor. He has activity. Okay, so that's why bishop e3 little bit neutralize his bishops, and okay, it's good to exchange the bishop. d5, same idea. How about bishop takes e3 instead? But of course, we don't take back immediately. We have a great intermediate continuation. Okay, I don't say this is hard. Knight d6 check, king e7, and f takes e3. Okay, now white's pawn structure seems to be ugly, but he gets some activity, like open the f-file with the rook. Still, he didn't play any moves with the rook, but the rook is already active. And the knight is also brilliant on d6, so simply brilliant. Knight c5, rook a d1, knight d3, and knight takes c4. The knight seems to be very good on d3, but now we undermine that with this knight takes c4. We win back the material also, and he has to leave the d3 square. So white is objectively winning already here. Still, his development is a big problem for a long time. Okay, how about if he would play castle here instead of the bishop e3, then rook a c1, bishop e3, f takes e3, and in the next move I will play also the rook takes c4, or maybe first knight d6, and also white's position is more promising. Just more promising. So that's why here d5 is the main, the same idea like against the knight d2. E takes d6, sacrifice, but castle, and his c8 bishop can develop. So if we a little bit think about that, it's really logical, because okay, he sacrificed back a pawn, but his bishop can come out, so he sacrificed the pawn but win a bishop. Yes, because the time is very important, usually more important than a pawn. Rook a c1, bishop takes e3, f takes, bishop d7. Development, and okay, a4. Yeah, his bishop is not bad now, so we don't move anywhere with the knight, just protect it. Rook f8. Not easy to do something with this pawn, because now already one move earlier, if he would play kind of bishop e6, we immediately can start to attack that with knight g5. And threatening to take it, and rook takes c4, and in case of bishop d5 we have e4. The bishop has to leave and rook takes c4, and white is better. So rook f8, rook takes c4, rook takes e3. So this was his idea, sacrifice the c4 but get the e3 for that. But now also I just come with b4, and white is simply much more promising. the position. Because for example, bishop b5, a takes b5, knight can't go to a normal square on b8, then he gets back rank checkmate, there is no other square, otherwise this knight is out of play completely. We have a d6 pawn also, which is even stronger than weaker. So yeah, his position is simply not easy and hard. Okay, alright. So let's go back a bit. This was the d takes c3, knight takes c3, and let's continue with b6, that's why. Knight takes d4. Bishop a6. And knight b5. Yeah, this was the point of the b6 from a6. He wanted to activate the bishop. However, now I block on b5, and yeah, I am just more active. Okay, bishop takes b5, because if queen c6 instead, I have the same a4 motif like in the previous variation. The b5 now is protected. Now the a6 bishop is tagged, so the knight closed the bishop's diagonal, so no any special point here. Bishop e7, knight 1 a3, castle, queen g6, and just f4, and white is better. Why? Let's see. Also, a very important factor here is that white pawn structure is much more flexible. Why a pawn structure is important, if that is flexible? Because we can simply go forward with that much easier. Look, black pawns can't really move properly. Yes, but f4, f5. If the pawns are going forward and the pieces are behind, it's very, very dangerous. Moreover, after f5 we have even some kind of attack against the black king also. So it's also just a harder situation for black. So queen c6 met by could have been met by a4. Let's see bishop b5. Moreover, with this he wanted to take our e5 pawn, but bishop e3. Yeah, actually, I feel that I have to show king d1 because it's also a typical move. I don't mean like those typical moves, like it's a common move, repeating moves in this variation, just because of the rook e1. So it's an understandable play. Bishop e7, rook e1, but objectively, unfortunately, this is not good because queen f5, and it's not clear how can we continue, because our pieces are also more or less on the back rank. We can't take pressure on his bishop because always queen d3 check, for example, if queen b4 here, and knight c6. Yes? If play a developing move, maybe bishop. Okay, bishop e3, I don't really want to block my rook, but let's say knight d2, then knight c6 followed by castle, because the bishop is already protected. So white can't really punish him now, because as I mentioned, white also doesn't have a big activity, a strong activity. Okay, so king d1 is here, is not really working, but bishop e3 is a completely nice, acceptable way, and knight c6. Yeah, because if bishop c5 instead, this is also a normal, logical move, because developing, take pressure on the e3 bishop, and I think the following move is also the typical dynamic move, castle. Of course I don't come back with the queen to protect the e3, instead I do a castle, I sacrifice my pawn even, but get activity for it. So for example, now if he would play bishop takes e3, Then we even have also great intermediate move with rook e1. Castle. Rook takes e3. Queen f5. And it's interesting, rook d3, so also little surprise, instead of the natural developing move, which I think it's also not bad, we continue with the rook d3 and attack him on the d5. Rook e8, knight d2, just go forward, rook e2, and rook f1. Knight c6, and queen takes d5. Okay, finally he took the pawn. Queen takes d5, rook takes d5. So materially now we are equal, but he has an isolated pawn, which is also weakness. Moreover, our knight is a bit more active and ready to jump on this way. So rook d8, for example, and after rook d1, white is slightly better. We will come with king f1. So this rook penetration alone is generally nothing, because I can chase away very easily. So here he doesn't have any special threat right now. Okay, alright, so let's go back. Let's see how about d4. Try to get some activity, but still not developed. So this is which we should somehow use out. His development is not so active, so it's a bit poor. C takes d4, bishop takes d4, and queen c4. So just come here with the queen, knight c6. Queen c4 actually a very interesting move, because let's see if he would play something else. For example, if he would take on b2, of course it's not working because, yeah, bishop activate or queen c8 check, both of them are really tempting. Queen c8, king e7, I take the rook. Also possible, but bishop takes a1. Let's see this bishop f4 if I get some activity. Queen, for example, e6. Okay, now check. King e7, take on h8, bishop a1. And we take the knight. And threatening with bishop d6 check. It should be actually better or winning position already. So this was the point of the bishop f4 intermediate move, but let's see if the immediate queen c8, I think it also should be fine. Take here, bishop takes a1, and now rook e1. Also extremely dangerous only for 2 pawns. His king is in the middle, our rook is active, we are threatening with check here and here to win the queen. So actually he's in a big trouble now. So bishop takes b2 was too dangerous. How about bishop takes e3? Yeah, we could take back, but then queen takes and just short castle. So check, short castle, and he just protected the f7 as well. So queen c8 check also here, king e7, and I think simply we grab the rook, and materially also better for white already. So that's why knight c6 most logical is the developing move. So I can recommend for everybody that mostly focus on the development, even if we feel we have some tempting move like bishop takes b2 or bishop takes e3, because those can be really dangerous sometimes. Okay. Bishop takes d4, knight takes d4, knight c3, and knight e6. And rook a d1. Why he goes back and why not castle? because after this his knight can be in a some trouble. So for example, if I play rook a d1, I also was thinking about rook fe1, but the queen can go to c5 still, and he's just protected himself, and it's approximately equal position, because otherwise the queen didn't have any other square, because queen f6, then knight d5 tempo. If queen d6, then rook a d1. So queen, but queen c5 he has. So that's why rook a d1 first. The knight has to leave. And okay, yeah, this is also good. Same like the knight e6, rook a d1 move order, because then he also shoot castle, and we simply goes to rook d5 with a good compensation for the pawn, because in the long term the d7 we will win back. Of course we could take it immediately also, but then maybe black also gets some activity, rook fc8 or rook fd8. Rook d5 is easier because now the queen has to leave. Yes, for example here, and then maybe we just take here and just a little bit better version, we chase away the queen from e5. Okay, good, so let's go back. This was the d4. Let's see how about the a6. Queen d3 and knight c6. Rook e1. Castle. Okay, he could finish the development just in time, but okay, black is okay, but white is also strategically fine, so give some compensation, like for example knight d2, because thanks for the 2d pawns. The Eva rook was unprotected, so that's why bishop c5 is not working, because this is hanging for free. So knight d2, queen d6, bishop takes c5. Now we take it, but let's see why, because bishop c5 seems to be a bit inaccuracy because of b takes c5. But after b takes c5, black pawn structure seems to be okay now, but we have a nice tactical move, the knight c4. Just jump here by tempo, thanks for the queen, the pin of the queen. He can't take, and if the queen leaves, then queen takes d5 and white is winning. Because suddenly win back the material, and again weakness is here. Very big problem for him. Okay, let's see how about queen takes c5. Rook a d1. Come with the last piece also. Rook f8. Rook takes e8. Rook takes e8. Knight f3. And we can just say white has a good compensation for the pawn. However, here we could even take the a6, which was also an option, but we always have to be careful for that. Don't lose the initiative, because then he has d4 and kind of counterplay. Maybe better to play just a more solid move. But why this is a good counterplay? Because if knight b3, the queen can just go to h5, and it's a tempo. So the position is approximately equal. Here maybe also, but black's situation is harder. Generally it's a double attack now, and both pawns are hanging there. So this is harder for him completely. Okay, perfect. And let's go back a little bit, and let's continue with knight c6, and then knight d2.